Hi, everyone, and thank you for attending our Questline webinar on using interactive content to engage customers. My name is Maureen Murky, and I'm the technical producer of today's webinar. Before we begin, we want to cover just a few housekeeping items. To the left of your screen are multiple application widgets you can use. Most of the widgets are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to get the most of your desktop space. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can submit them through the Q&A widget, which is directly below the presentation window. We will try to answer all questions during the webcast, but if a more in-depth answer is needed or we run out of time, they will be answered later via email. Some networks may cause slides to advance more slowly than others, so logging off your VPN is recommended. If your slides do fall behind, pushing F5 on your keyboard will refresh the page. If you experience any other disruptions during the broadcast, please use the Q&A widget for any technical questions. We will be sending everyone a follow-up email within the next few days, which will include a PDF of the PowerPoint presentation and a playback link to the recording of today's webinar. We will also be conducting poll questions during the presentation and would greatly appreciate your participation. Please be aware that you are not the only participant today. The names of the other attendees are not being shown to you for privacy. Now, let me introduce today's host. Mike Carter is a senior engineer for Questline. Mike has a bachelor's in engineering and an MBA degree from The Ohio State University. He is also a certified energy manager. At Questline, Mike writes articles for newsletters, answers Ask an Expert inquiries, and develops webinars on energy topics. And now I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mike, who will introduce our guests and get things started for us today.
Thank you, Maureen, and welcome to another webinar in our Plugged-In series. This month's topic is using interactive content to engage customers. And as shown in our agenda, we're going to be discussing what interactive media is and its various content formats. We'll also share how interactive content can increase engagement and build long-term customer relationships. And if you're interested in how you can make existing or new content interactive, well, we're going to cover that as well. Then we'll share some examples of customer-focused interactive experiences. Now, in between, you'll have a chance to answer some very insightful poll questions, and we'll share the answers with everyone, so be sure to participate. And at the end, we'll answer your questions. In the meantime, at any time, just click on the Q&A box on the left side of your screen with the question mark icon to submit any questions. But before we begin, let me introduce our three speakers today. Brian Lindamood is Assistant Vice President of Marketing and Content Strategy at Questline. He leads a team that delivers engaging, educational content solutions and digital marketing campaigns. Previously, Brian was Director of Content Marketing for Manta Media, one of the largest online communities for small business owners, where he worked to empower business owners with expert advice and educational resources around digital marketing. Robert Abbott is a digital communication designer and entrepreneur with more than 20 years' experience. His work for U.S. and global clients, including Bacardi Global Brands, Scotts Miracle-Gro, Panasonic, and Deutsche Bank, has received numerous national and international awards. Robert's founded several successful digital design firms, including Ignition, Motivo, Shift Global, and presently Context Digital. Robert's background includes experience as a human interface designer with Apple Computer's Advanced Technology Group in Cupertino, California. Matt Irving is the Creative Director of Video Content at Questline. Matt brings nearly 2 decades of experience in the storytelling field, having written ads for TV, radio, print, and web. He's developed web series, built social media campaigns, created websites, and crafted live event experiences for multiple brands. Among his greatest brags is directing Mr. Arnold Palmer for a series of TV and web ads Matt developed for the Arnold Palmer International. Now I'm going to launch the first of 4 polls today. There we go. And the poll question is, to what degree have you used interactive content in your communications during the last 12 months? We have 4 choices, ranging from not at all to all the time, or maybe somewhere in between. Maybe you have used it in the last 12 months at least one time, or maybe a few times, but not really all the time. So pick the one that best fits you and describes your experience the last 12 months. We appreciate your participation in the polls, and we're going to be sharing the results. So jump in there. I think all of us would like to know just how active everyone's been in using or perhaps not using interactive content during the last 12 months. I see a number of you have jumped on that, answering the poll. We really appreciate that. Getting some good results. Still got results coming in. And looks like that slowed down quite a bit, so let's go ahead and take a look at that. So a lot of you actually have done it a few times, but about the same amount of you have done it either not at all or really only one time. So hopefully you'll have take away some good ideas and content from our presentation this afternoon actually. So with that, let's hear from Matt. Take control, Matt, and introduce us to interactive content.
Thanks, Mike. So interactive content is really unique, especially in the marketing field, because it's a two-way experience. It requires active participation from the user. They have to click, but those clicks, they're rewarded for those clicks because they get to take the journey that they want in the most relevant way to them. So it becomes more conversational. It stops being lectured or talked to and start being talked with and having that. So, in interactive, I like to say when you have the power to click as a user, you can feel heard because your click is your voice, right? So those conversational, so some of the types, and we'll go in more detail of these types, but it might be a wizard or some kind of a decision tree to help navigate through a difficult decision, a buying decision, perhaps. You could use a quiz to reinforce proper safety habits. An infographic will allow people to drill down into the things beyond the headline that they find interesting. Or it could be a giant microsite that brings people in and they can start to interact and explore with things maybe that they didn't know they were going to experience. So, they come for the entertainment and stay for the rebate or the program or whatever that might be. So that's really the type of thing we're talking about with interactive. It allows people to go in and do those things, interact, and find the journey that they want to take to remain relevant. So why would you do interactive journey as a marketer? Well, we know that, someone knows, they did research, I assume, that people are more likely to remember and learn about your product, about your message when they're interacting with it rather than if it's just in front of them. Customer expectations, right? Customers expect this. We live in an on-demand world. We sit on our couch, we click on our whatever streaming program we have, and we watch it whenever we want, and we get to watch whatever we want whenever we want. And then third, and probably the most biggest, is it grabs attention. It's different. And in fact, there's this stat: 81% of marketers agree that interactive content grabs attention more effectively than static content. Because it was a quote, I read it. So I think that seems obvious to us, but when you see the actual 81% number, like, we all know this. This is not a leap of faith in knowing that this should happen. So why is it so powerful? How can we take what we know, what we feel, and say, but this really does work? Well, we know it's powerful because it's more rewarding. The customer wants to have fun, but also, again, as they interact, they're choosing where they go and what they do. And so because they have that power, they're taking the most, again, relevant path to the information they can get. It's also human nature. We love to explore. That's what we are as people in society. It's why we're going to Mars. Social sharing. We know that quizzes, things that are cool, people like to share that. They like to be in the know. They like to test their friends and go against that stuff, which makes it very social, right? It makes it a great thing to share and say, I got 94. What did you get? Or I don't know what the quiz was that they got 94 on, but that sounds like a good score. And we know that it can also break through the clutter. something that's unique, something that's different, something that strikes a tone with us from a brand, from whatever, it resonates, and it's different than the brand that's not doing that thing and not letting us have a say in what we're doing. And so those are all great reasons, things that this type of interactive marketing can bring to the table. In fact, 88% of marketers said that interactive content is effective from their competitors. So, that's not just me as a creative director saying that. That's a lot of people who are sitting in your seat saying that as well. So to get into that aspect of it, I'm going to toss it over to Brian, and Brian will give you that tour through the back end.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, Matt just shared a lot of reasons why customers like interactive content. I'd like to dig a little deeper into how marketers benefit from this engagement, as Matt mentioned. Probably the biggest thing that we see that we get out of interactive content as marketers is a better understanding of our customers. So think about it this way. If a customer reads an article or even watches a video, we have a pretty good sense that they must be interested in that topic. But we don't know why they're interested in it, or how much they already know about that topic, or even what they learned about it after engaging with our content. With interactive content, we can gain that insight. When we ask customers to answer a question in a quiz, or click on one element or another, choose to watch one video or another, we're giving customers an opportunity to tell us about themselves. By interacting with this content, customers show us what they know about it, what they learned from it, or why they're interested in it. Then when we capture this information, when we record customer answers to a quiz, say, this becomes valuable first-party data that we can then use in our marketing. Ultimately, this is going to improve our marketing efforts. It's going to improve conversion rates because we'll have a better understanding of our customers, and we've given them a chance to tell us what they're looking for. At Questline, we have a quiz we created called "Is an electric vehicle right for you?" This quiz asks a series of questions that guides customers through the decision-making process about buying an EV. For instance, how far is their commute to work? Is there a charging station at your work? Are you more concerned about saving money or saving the environment? Based on the customer's answers to these questions, we can enter them into a segmented campaign that addresses their specific concerns or their specific motivations. So the quiz itself is useful and interesting for the customer, but the follow-up campaign can be extremely valuable because we're providing targeted information based on what we learned about that customer. This is why interactive content is so successful. It requires the customer's attention. It requires their involvement, as Matt was pointing out. As marketers, we can learn from our customers' activity and tailor the experience to their needs, and ultimately help them sign up for a program or service that we know is going to be relevant to them. This is critical for energy utilities. Unlike most marketers who are promoting products or services that are pretty well understood by consumers, we need to explain sometimes very complicated energy topics that are new to customers and that can be intimidating to customers. Education is a huge part of what we do as utility marketers and program managers. Interactive content is a great way to do that. With interactive content, you have the time and the space to unravel complicated topics. You have the customer's involvement, so they're paying attention. You also have a chance to really help them learn about your program or service. And not incidentally, this learning should be taking place in an experience that's also fun and entertaining, which makes it even more memorable. We created for an IOU in the Northeast a microsite built around interactive videos to explain EMS, or energy management systems, for C&I customers. I'm sure we have some key account managers with us today, so you know how challenging it can be to explain something like boiler controls or chiller efficiency with a text article, right? With interactive video, these topics come to life. You can literally show how boiler controls work, and the customer can click around and explore topics at their own pace. In this microsite we created, the program information is also integrated. So you can learn about chiller efficiency and then sign up for the EMS rebate program within the same experience. With articles, you can get a lot of information in there. Videos are very effective at showing and explaining energy topics. But when it comes to learning, when education is a big part of your goal, interactive content is just a vital part of that content strategy. There's another important goal here for energy utilities that may be different from marketers in other industries. We don't measure customer relationships in months or years. We measure customer relationships in decades. And maintaining customer satisfaction with their utility throughout that life cycle is just so important to us. So how does interactive content help? Well, when an experience is entertaining as well as informative, it really makes the customer not just more interested, but more likely to engage with it. You're showing the customer that you care about their needs and interests. You're not just harping on them to save energy with a boring text article, right? You're entertaining them. You're literally interacting with them while also demonstrating that your utility is a helpful resource for them. Something that's sort of related to that, and we see this often at Questline, often education is its own goal in our communication strategy. So we might use educational content to promote program signups or to sell smart thermostats on a marketplace. But we also might have an educational content strategy just because we want customers to learn something. Often we're not trying to sell them something. We just want them to be more energy efficient or to learn about safety, to understand how the grid works. We created a video game for an IOU here in the Midwest to teach customers how DACR technology on the smart grid detects outages and restores power. You can imagine this is a pretty dry technical topic for a residential audience, right? But the game is fun. You have to click on this map of a neighborhood to avoid the tree limbs and squirrels and cars crashing into utility poles. And it's repeatable, the user wants to keep playing it until you win and restore power. Now, there's no program to sign up for. There's not really any action for customers to take here other than playing the game, but it's a pretty fun way to learn how the grid works, and that's the kind of connection that can help build loyalty and customer satisfaction in the long run. Interactive content has that staying power. You can include a quiz on a program landing page or have just a fun video game, and that's going to have value for much longer than another piece of content. There's this repeatability. Customers will return to the interactive piece to play it again, try the quiz again, to watch more of the videos or even share them with their friends. And not only does this support our educational goals, it's also building that loyalty and that long-term customer engagement that ultimately we're after. So Mike, with that, let me turn it back to you for another poll question.
Well, thanks, Brian, for making the business case for interactive content. And we have our second of 4 poll questions today. Question is, what's the main barrier that's keeping you from using interactive content? And we've given you 4 specific answers, and then if none of those apply, you can choose other. And maybe it's going to be just an issue of value, maybe it's an issue of finding available interactive content. Maybe you're just don't have a comfort level with interactive media, you're not familiar with it enough, which won't be the case after today. Or maybe you don't have the internal expertise and skills to produce interactive media internally. So again, we appreciate you participating in our polls, and it looks like a number of you are making choices. We got one clear leader right now. We'll see if that holds. And while you're doing that, remember that if you have any questions about content that's already been shared about interactive media or just something that you've wondered about for some time, look over on the left at the Q&A box with the question mark icon. Click on that and you'll be able to submit a question, and we'll address that right when we wrap up at the end here. So I'm going to go ahead and push results to audience. Most of you, it's really a lack of being able to produce that content in terms of a lack of expertise and skills. And the rest of you do address being able to finding it and your comfort level, but mainly it's wanting to produce that internally and not really having the ability to do so. So with that, Robert, you're up. Go ahead and take control and share with us what kind of content can be made interactive.
Thank you, Mike. So some great points have been made already, and I won't rehash the power of interactive content. It does allow users to own their experience, and that will benefit your brand and your company. So let's talk a little bit about how do we do it. And I wanted to highlight a couple of areas. First is technical, and then the second is creative. And I don't want to overwhelm people with the technical side of it, but I think there are some things that you want to keep in mind as you start to plan these types of exercises. First is, no surprise, it can come with added costs and resources. As we all know, creating great content is expensive. And if you're getting into video, if you're getting into interactive video, if you're getting into any types of things which start to tie together databases and data tracking, things like that, there's more overhead there. It's simply put, it's more complex. Knowing what you're getting into as you head down that journey will help you plan and make decisions early on. Second is, I wrote management and usability, but it's really internal and external expectations. So sometimes people will see something that they think is pretty creative or cool, and they'll want to build it without any knowledge of what's involved in making that actually happen. So I think there sometimes needs to be a level set with internal management about what an interactive piece is getting into. Is it tracking data? Is it responding to users in certain ways? Is it requiring internal or external hosting in order to make sure that that experience is stable and is enjoyable for users? Recently, we did a smarter home piece with Matt and his team, and it included a lot of interactive video. We'll talk about that a little bit later. It's easy to trivialize the load of what it takes to actually seamlessly deliver interactive video. So getting a heads up on how to plan for that and how to test it will be important. The second one is usability from a technical standpoint of knowing your audience. What is their threshold? What is their experience? What are they used to interacting with? Sometimes we can make things that are more complex than they may be ready for. I'll talk a little bit about their expectations more in a minute. But making sure you understand where they're coming from so that your content is hitting the right mark. Third, specialized technology and coding. Some of these things do require us to go further, as I mentioned, with data capture. If there's some logic behind the experience, which, as Matt mentioned, you start to make a decision which will lead you down this path, and it starts to branch off as it goes, all of that needs to be planned out in advance. Again, a lot of us are coming from the creative side, so don't let the technology piece completely get in the way of trying to determine what you think the most useful experience will be. Just have it in your mind that that's something that's going to come up, especially as you work with other partners internally or externally to build it. Lastly, technically, and this also is easy to overlook, is making sure you understand where you're delivering. As we all know, there's tons of different browsers and browser versions. There's tons of different devices and operating systems. There's tons of platforms. Trying to build for all of them will make you crazy. And you need to understand who your audience is, and you can't necessarily afford to go to the edge cases or to test to the edge cases. But if you have specific audiences, oftentimes they will fit in largely a very specific footprint, and you can optimize for a specific platform. Again, you have to test it in order to know for sure. So how do we go about that? 4 basic steps. No real magic here, except in the details of how you pull it off. First is brainstorming. And again, we've been in lots of situations where somebody thinks that there's something that's particularly cool that they want to do, but it may not necessarily pay attention to the exact communication challenge that your user or customer is trying to solve. That's what matters most. We already talked about letting users own their experience. So this is their experience, it's their question, it's their task, it's their challenge. So as you brainstorm, this isn't about creating viral things. It was already mentioned. This is great interactive content has a very long life cycle. And while it might be expensive to produce initially, the value that it produces over time can return many, many times over. So when you're thinking about this on the brainstorming side, what's engaging, what's useful, what's helpful to your customers? Have you really identified who you're trying to target and what it is that they need help with along their buying journey or their research journey, whatever that is? As has already been shown, the right content can give them confidence, it can build trust and help them feel smarter and associate part of that smartness to you as a brand. Second one is creation. That's the design and the writing process. And, having developed a lot of respect for writers, again, the narrative and the experience has to be positioned around your customer. So as you think through these ideas, don't hesitate to run some rough ideas or to test with your target market early on to make sure that it is hitting the mark that you've identified as important, that it is solving the problem that you have understood your customers to be having. Third, marketing, if you build it, they will come, doesn't really work unless it necessarily goes viral. But in the case of, I think, longer term value interactive content, that isn't really the focus. It's nice if it happens, but the real value of interactive content, it's in the right place at the right time, and it helps the customer with their challenges. So if they're looking at a broad range of product options and they're not sure exactly what product is for them, how much product they might need, these are things that can fit exactly. And if you know what their journey is, you can place marketing opportunities to make sure they're going to pick up that interactive content at the right time. Lastly, testing. I mentioned this already, and Matt and I know this from recent experience. We think it's all working great until it isn't. If you make assumptions that everything is going to go perfectly, you're probably going to miss something. And this kind of goes back to what browsers you're targeting, what technology that the users may have that they're trying to view this on, especially if you're trying to go desktop-based browser versus a mobile experience. They have different interaction patterns, and then there are things that you'll discover. There are questions that users have that you probably haven't anticipated. So make sure you have enough lead time to put that through the paces, and you can make sure you're launching a product that really works. Because if it's meeting their needs, if it's answering their questions, if it's helping them on their journey, that is so powerful. So lastly, just a couple takeaways for tips. This has kind of been talked about already, and I've already mentioned a little bit. Don't create it just because you can. Create it because it is the most effective path to helping a customer understand what they are trying to do. That early days of the web, we made lots of stuff because we could. And for those of you who are old enough to remember Flash, that was the land of could, not because you should. Now we come to the web, we come to our mobile apps because we're trying to accomplish a task. And interactive content is really the sweet spot between their needs and what you have to offer. And if you use it effectively, it can be really gold. Secondly, we talked about the expense of creating content. Good news is, and we find this with a lot of clients, chances are you're already sitting on a lot of it. You don't have to start from scratch. Part of it is, when you're thinking about the brainstorming process, connect the challenge that you understand your customers to have with the content that you already have. And part of it is maybe repackaging that, or taking the content you have, positioning it in a quiz. So by virtue of the customer answering questions about their own interests, you're gaining enough intelligence then to push back to them. This is the product suite or the product bundle or the type of product or the amount of product that is right for your particular needs. Thirdly, decide going in how you're going to measure success. A lot of us will focus on downloads or clicks or shares, and those are pretty important, but sometimes we can get distracted by just those quantitative metrics. I think you want to also figure out ways to monitor the qualitative side of things, right? What are they doing with that information? What is the longer stream interaction from the engagement that you have with them? If you're getting their email address, if you're getting other information about them, not only what they did with your interactive piece in the moment, but what is it that allows you to do over time? And this isn't bold because it's important. What does your customer or your audience need or want? Again, we oftentimes internally will focus on what we think the right thing is to do, but if it isn't really paying attention or isn't really being tested with your audience, then you may not have it dialed in correctly. Second to last, match the format. So part of this is meet the customer with what they want. So if you've developed an interactive experience and really they just came to spend a minute, you're going to be over the mark and they're going to leave and the investment won't be there. It could be that they're really doing a heavy research function and you can tailor the interactive piece to support that intention. Or maybe it's something that's pretty topical and they're looking for a quick answer. Again, understand the audience and their goals and fit to that. Lastly, sort of like picking up content that you already have in your organization, there may be partners that you have in the industry that have things that you can leverage. So you're, again, one, not starting from scratch, or two, having to have a heavy lift to create things. You can oftentimes build experiences by leveraging intelligence from others, and a lot of that halo then comes around your brand because you are seen as the thought leader to connect the dots for your customers in the way that's important to them. So those, hopefully those are useful. There's some tips on at least how you get started. It doesn't have to be that risky as you get started. I think if you make sure at each step of the way you're meeting your customers' needs, then the investment will reach its full potential. There you go, Mike.
Let me try that again. I got to take control here.
And
we're going to launch our third poll. Great job on sharing the how-tos, Robert. But our third poll is this question: what types of interactive media are of most interest to you? And we have 5 choices. You can choose up to 2. Of all those 5, which one is most attractive? Where do you think you can get the biggest value from? Is it some sort of calculators? Is it maybe more of a quiz or a game like Brian just shared recently here? Maybe it's an infographic, an image, or even a video that you can do some interaction with. So what is your preference? Got a lot of diversity in this quiz answer poll question, so very interesting. Go ahead and keep making your choices. Now it's starting to flesh out. We got some clear winners here. And again, if you have any questions about what he just shared, type those in the Q&A box, the question mark icon box. Okay, now it's come back here. You guys have a range of interests, so let me go ahead and push that out and share the results with everyone else. And quite a range of interests, so pretty much all of these areas, and maybe not so surprising because there's some great value in all of those. All right, well, I'm going to toss over to Brian. Brian, take control and share some examples of interactive media. And while he's doing that, we're all going to go off screen for a little bit, but we'll be back right at the end.
Thank you, Mike. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here so we can actually share some examples of all this stuff that we've been talking about. There we go. So one type of interactive content Mike just mentioned, we haven't talked a lot about yet, is calculators. Calculators can be a really valuable tool, especially for energy utilities, for the types of topics that we're trying to educate customers about. You know, customers can use these to compare costs, to evaluate the benefits of a purchase. It can really help them make a decision, but it also just deepens their understanding of the impact of energy on their monthly bill. And that's what this example, how much energy does your TV use? You know, this is a fun graphic. It shows how much it costs to watch a big screen TV. And, you know, it's something that a customer might use if they're making a purchase decision. In fact, I think we have a CTA at the bottom about buying an Energy Star TV, which is useful. But I think even more than that, it's just something that's fun to play with and sort of learn about how these different factors affect your energy bill. So in this case, you can adjust the slider here to see, you know, what the impact is of a 75-inch screen versus a, what do we have, you know, 48-inch screen here. So you can see the different types of TV, how much power it consumes, and then how much that would cost you every year on your energy bill. You can also adjust how many hours a day you watch it. And I like how this interactive image here, the longer you watch it, the later it gets, and the lights kind of go out there. And then you can also, in this case, we have your electric rate as a adjustable user input. Often we'll actually set that on the utility level and have that as kind of a hidden field in the background. But you know, for demo purposes, the customer could change their rate here. Kind of similar interaction, much more complicated topic, of course, is solar energy. And this is a calculator that is meant to help customers who are making a decision about whether they'd want to install PV panels on their roof, residential solar. You know, I think just like in that last example, I think one thing that's effective here is how simple the input is. So in this case, to gauge a customer's energy use, we have this simple slider where they can enter their monthly electric bill. Now, you know, of course, there's a pretty complicated calculation that's going on under the hood here. But from the user standpoint, we want it to be easy. And we don't even necessarily want the customer to have to scramble and find, you know, 6 months of billing history or something like that. Just like, you know, what do you pay every month? I think it's about $120. To choose your state here, of course, this is, again, something that we could set at the utility level. In this case, we have it as an open field. The results then, you know, are pretty easy to read. We're giving an output on lots of different factors, number of panels you might need, how much power that system is going to generate. But then we also have the kind of, you know, engaging, fun look at what's the impact of this. If I do make this investment, I'm going to save some money year over year. I can measure the return on that, but I can also measure what my impact is on the environment. When I mentioned earlier repeatability, this is the kind of thing that customers just love to play with, right? And you go up and you say, like, well, what if I have 100 solar panels on my roof? How many pounds of CO2 am I going to take off the air, out of the air then? And, you know, they can get kind of silly on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's really an effective way for customers to learn about that impact, you know, even when they're just doing it to play around. They might not realize that they're actually learning something. I mentioned this quiz earlier. This is an EV quiz that we can also use to capture information about the customers. So, for instance, we're asking why they're interested in an electric vehicle, asking how far they might drive every day. And then along the way, we can give advice, you know, kind of respond in real time, like, hey, this, you know, if you're driving 50 miles to work, an EV might not be right for you. And as I mentioned, we can also capture this information on the back end and follow up with specific messages. And so, You may find somebody who's interested in an EV but doesn't know about home charging, and that's one message that you might deliver. Maybe someone's interested in the environmental savings but concerned about how much money this is going to cost. Another type of message you can follow up. And so, it's this interaction of learning from our customers, listening to this kind of feedback that our customers provide that can really improve our marketing and just help us better meet our customers' needs in response. This is a quiz that's maybe more in the fun category. Didn't realize how much you were learning because it was so much fun to play with. We have a whole series of these quizzes. Who Wants to Be an Energy Expert? That's meant to sort of feel like a TV game show. We've produced them around a variety of topics. But it's, again, it's the kind of thing that can be fun, that can be repeatable for customers. At every one of these touch points, it gives us an opportunity to offer a little bit of education, but in more of a memorable way. In this case, we also have these features of Phone a Friend or Ask an Expert, which is another opportunity in a very sort of relatable way to share this kind of information. See the Ask an Expert here, another opportunity to educate customers with a quiz like this. And one other infographic that I wanted to share with you, this Wasted Energy Detective. This is another series that we have. Again, this is an educational, sort of fun way to approach some of these topics. In this case, energy efficiency in the living room. So in this case, it's sort of a game where you try and find these little energy monsters popping up. And then when you find one, you get this tip about how easy it is to save energy by switching to LED lamps, as an example. And I'll say, to toot our own horn a little bit, I'll point out that this particular infographic just won a National Content Marketing Award from the Content Marketing Institute because of the kind of customer engagement performance that it's delivered. So we're really proud about that and happy to share that with you. So I want to bring Matt and Robert back in here to share this other solution that we're really proud of and happy to share with you.
Thanks, Brian. So this interactive site features a home that you can go in and look around. And as a writer, this came from an idea from a story to tell. People like to hear things from neighbors, people they know, they go through. And so we wanted to tell the story that we tell regularly in our content, but we wanted to tell not just that one thing, but all the things and how they all hang together. How energy efficiency is, it's great. It's going to lower your electric bill. Energy efficiency also can make life better. And so we wanted to bring it to life in a natural setting. So we said it in the home. We wanted it to have a relatable tone. So we developed this family of characters that all have fun personalities. And they care first and foremost about the quality of life. You'll hear that as they go through. The decisions they made weren't them sacrificing to get to this stuff, but it was them saying, this made our life better. Also, here's this other side. And so they liked that they were saving energy. They liked that they were saving it because of money. They liked that they were saving it for environmental reasons. And you hear the different characters have their perspectives on those, and we tried to hold true to those the whole way. We wanted the people to be able, the users, to be able to receive information in a really organic way. And so this comes back to, when you go to somebody's house and you say, oh, you got an EV, tell me about it, or solar, they're going to pull out their phone and show you, how they're, the map of their panels on their house and how each one's performing, right? That's the type of thing that happens, and it's believable and it's authentic. And when people have those things and you hear someone talk about that, you feel good. And so we want to do the same thing. This family you're in their home, and by clicking, you're asking them about things around their house, right? And so, so they click and everything's video based, as Robert alluded to earlier. And you hear a little bit about that, but you'll also see the way that it's built where there's the ability to go deeper, not just with a little more content on the side that you can read, but then you can go into a program or you can go into, the marketplace or any of these other things. Everything's all connected. And I mentioned earlier, you come in for this thing, but people like to explore. And so the more blinking dots we could put on there that were relevant to this journey and to this family and to looking at this stuff and what they, the better. And so, we wanted to bring this family to life, and it was really important to have a seamless experience. And so that's where Robert and I started having some conversations of how we could do that. Robert.
Yeah, no. So to echo what Matt just mentioned, this is a great canvas as a familiar environment to start a conversation, right? Energy efficiency, energy usage, they're really complex ideas, and a lot of times we don't understand what it means until we see it in an environment that we can relate to. So, you take a look around the home. Obviously, it maps to a lot of what our typical environments are. So we're able to understand, well, what do each of these details mean in each of these places? And as Matt alluded, providing additional interactivity to help them take that interest further. What do they do about it? What is next? What products can they buy, et cetera? Matt mentioned in this experience the ability to basically look around the home. So if we think about it from a creative standpoint or a technical standpoint, you think, oh, hey, no problem. I can just, navigate 3D model all around this house. Well, from an idea standpoint, that makes sense. Technically, it's really, really difficult to understand how do you make transitions, how do you manage the selected states in each of the rooms, and so on and so forth. And what we ended up in this build was something that works really well to be able to allow you to focus on all of the interactive details within each room, but then transition across without getting overly complicated or exposing ourselves to things that may on certain computers fail. So it's in all, the experience works out really, really seamlessly, and I think provides the ability to have a really clear understanding.
Matt and Robert, why don't I go ahead and walk through a few rooms here to give an idea of how it works.
Welcome to our home. It's always a pleasure to give the grand tour. We've put a lot of thought into how we use our energy. Hopefully some of our ideas will help you save in your home too. So, where do you want to start?
So, even think before we go in, Robert, one of the things we wanted to make sure was that we didn't force them through any specific pattern. And so we had some conversations about this. And when we designed, you notice the whole time it was up on the front. On the bottom over there, one of the things that was important is navigation to any room very quickly. So you could skip any of that stuff. If you wanted to skip that video, you could click on it and it would stop too, I believe, or there's an X in the corner. So we wanted people to be able to find what room might apply to them. They might be looking for something specifically. And so if we, click on, let's go ahead and click in the kitchen. Anytime we click on a room,
we're in and out of our kitchen all day long, and everyone has a job. But to go one step further, we all figured out great ways to be even more energy efficient. Want to learn more?
This site is so well built. That was so fast. I expected slightly more lag in this system. So she does an intro in every room. So we learn about what's the basic thing that's happening in the kitchen. What's their family philosophy, right? And so each of these things clicks and different characters come out. We've seen the mother because she's sort of the host of this. But the other thing you'll see is on the side, there's all these check marks. If you click on one, they pop out, or you can just click through. There's the opportunity to learn more about Energy Star dishwashers. You can shop for LEDs. If you go on microwaves or pots and pans, it leads to other tips and stuff that are within, that you are typically on a page. Here's some energy efficiency tips, and it leads you to that stuff. So we really ran the gambit of the topics. But again, how do we make those things come to life? And, Robert and his team really worked with us on the way we have these, making sure it's very easy for people to use. Robert, if you remember, we talked about at one point, is this a full-on immersive 3D experience you could control? And we didn't know what purpose that served to tell the story better. It made it more confusing.
Right.
But
no, that plays into, deciding what experience makes the most sense or is more valuable, because the overhead of trying to manage a navigable 3D experience, actually, the tail starts to wag the dog. You're now focusing more about how to get it done versus the content and the value that you're delivering. And this was a really elegant solution.
And everybody sort of played their part in this too. If you click on the dishwasher, you'll see the sun is involved. And go ahead.
Yeah.
When I realized that the dishwasher is more energy efficient than hand washing dishes, I called this. All I do is scrape, make sure I only run full loads, and hit the air dry button. Boom. I just saved up to 15% on energy consumption. That deserves some screen time.
Not until your homework's done.
So again, it reset. From a technical standpoint, one of the things we did here is you're looking at a still screen with some dots. We worked meticulously. We probably exported a few 3, 4, 5 rounds before we figured out the exact export settings to make sure that the first and last frame of the video were always right. That part was easy, but then that it also was the frame that matched the entire room. So from a technical standpoint, from thinking through how do we do this, how do we make it seamless, Robert talked about that testing. Even before we were even close to showing what this thing was going to be like, it was just taking that image and the rough video and trying to match stuff up to make sure it was smooth and seamless. And so we were doing testing before we were even building the whole site. I think that's a fair thing to say.
Yeah.
Matt, is there another video you'd like me to show here?
You could do the refrigerator.
Mm-hmm.
We had our old fridge for almost 15 years, and it worked great. But we realized that we could reduce our energy use by 1/3 with a new Energy Star refrigerator. Plus, they have the coolest new features, like a reminder to close the fridge doors. What? I better go check on that.
So one thing to note also is you notice when Brian clicked on the videos, a little title card came up. That was actually done intentionally. So built in with this, we talked about if you think it through efficiently and how you build this stuff, all those are individual pieces. If you only saw that video, you would understand the message of that video and the point that it's supposed to make. And so those were built to be used in social media for marketing or to emails for specific tips, or peel those out, use them in different ways, and then still be able to say, hey, want to learn more, and send people back. And we deliberately built the entire site. We wrote every script so it didn't rely on anything else anywhere in there, so that it could go back and do that and serve all those purposes. Like, if we're making this thing, let's really make it. And that's you could take content that exists and do that kind of stuff. We talked about that. These were all obviously specifically made for this thing, but we wanted to make sure we got the most value out of them. And when you're doing interactive and you're thinking about how all that stuff comes together, you really have to have the flow chart. And I talked too long apparently, so I think Mike, you got some questions. I think
very creative. Yeah, we have a few audience questions we want to get to before we wrap up. So first is, do you have any information around cost versus benefit analysis of using interactive content for demand-side management programs? And they added beyond the Outgrow quote about conversion in the webinar description. So maybe, Brian, you could just talk even in general about how to approach cost versus benefit analysis for using interactive content.
Yeah, I hate to answer a question by saying it depends, but it really depends on what the particular program is and what your program goals are. Um, and it goes back to something I mentioned earlier, which is, you have your direct program goals, so you're measuring program signups, say, and that's relatively easy to measure, and we do that with all of our digital marketing campaigns, whether it's interactive or not. And so you can simply measure the cost versus the number of signups that you get in each channel. What's not as easy to measure, but where I think that interactive content adds a lot of value is that educational aspect to it, right? So, if you get somebody who visits your, say, a microsite or a quiz to learn about demand response programs, even if they don't sign up for demand response, they may be learning an awful lot about the program. That may help them make a decision to sign up later, or not. But, I guess the worst case scenario in that case is that you have an educated customer who now knows how demand response works. And so, sometimes it's important to weigh those, kind of the direct, what we usually measure in the digital marketing world, the direct conversion metrics versus the value that you get out of education.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of questions. Yeah, that's good. Next question is, if you wanted to use these interactive games as part of a contest, do they have some sort of form of tracking to capture who participated and whether they won?
You could certainly build them that way. Yeah, I mean, if in the case of a contest, I would probably have, either before is the first or the last screen before or after you take a quiz. Just have a simple sign-up page, enter your email address to find out if you're a winner, something like that. So yeah, you could build a piece like that.
Okay. The next question is, what software would you recommend learning? This is from a client, of course. What softwares, plural, would you recommend learning if I wanted to create a quiz or poll for members' initiatives? So if they're going to do it yourself type of thing, what would you direct them to create some of this interactive content? Or would you advise not doing that?
Yeah, Robert, do you have any thoughts on that? Robert, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. There's a number of tools and platforms out there. I think a lot of it comes down to where, based on your skill level, you can get started pretty easily with different types of tools, everything from Google to other programs that offer tools that you can embed into your experiences. And of course, talk to the technical side of your operation and how things are being hosted right now, how that gets plugged in. But it can be relatively straightforward.
All right. Well, we've run out of time today, so if we didn't get to your question, we'll be following up offline with that. And I really appreciate our speakers today. We're going to have our last poll question, and it's based on what you learned today, will you start using more interactive content in your communications? We have 3 choices. Again, pick the one that reflects how you feel right now. You have no interest. Maybe you're going to try it for the first time. Maybe you already use it and you're going to want to use it more often. Maybe you've learned how maybe different kinds of media can be made interactive, and you'd like to try some different media that you haven't tried in the past. So appreciate your feedback on that. And as you work on that, I'm going to go ahead and just recap some of the things I thought we heard today. And I think we heard that any part of a marketing strategy that leverages content can be enhanced with interactivity. And a lot of the customers are expecting interactive content as well. I think we saw the numbers that Matt and Brian shared, that interactive content positively impacts engagement metrics for various programs. And I know Brian made a big point that utilities can leverage interactive content to teach companies complex topics like renewable energy and electric vehicles. And I also appreciate what Robert emphasized, don't reinvent new content. for interactivity. Rather, use content you already have, like blog posts or white papers, and reimagine them in interactive ways. And I think with all the examples that Brian shared, you can see there are numerous forms of interactive content out there, such as games, wizards, infographics, multi-touch photos and videos, all those kind of things. So let me go ahead and share the results of our poll. And we're encouraged. You're either going to use it more often or maybe try it for the first time. So, and of course, we're here to help any way we can. So with that, again, thank you, Matt, Brian, and Robert, for your excellent insights from your experience with interactive content. And thank you, audience, as well, for attending today and your great questions. So now we're going to hear some closing comments from Maureen.
Hello again, and thank you, Mike, and I would like to thank all of you for attending our webinar today. As a reminder, the presentation materials and the playback link to the recording of today's webinar will be emailed to you within the next couple of days. If you have any additional questions or feedback, please don't hesitate to contact us. And remember to set September 16th aside for our next Plugged In webinar, where we will discuss energy efficiency adoption solutions. Thank you again for attending, and have a great day, everyone.